Thank you, President Chancellor Cook. As a former student of mine, I'm very proud of you and thankful for you. This university I refer to as the Phoenix of Baptist life. It really came from the ashes to what it is today, and largely under the servant leadership of Dr. Cook. Thank you for that. I can't believe this crowd. I looked around and I thought, my whole life is being lived out before me again. Every phase of it from my growing up years. Raymond Goforth over here, we used to shoot doves together and almost killed him one day with a shotgun accidentally. To seminary days and to Wichita Falls. I baptized the Don Wills family, and they have become outstanding Baptist Christians. To Golden Gate, some of the former Golden Gate students are here tonight from California. Our speaker was almost buried by a mudslide, I think, and couldn't make it, but several were. And so many from the convention and seminary days and all. If I took time to go around and talk about everybody here, we would be here till next week. I think I should give special acknowledgement, however, just briefly anyway, to family. Bobby and I have been married 60 years. Bobby, thank you for taking the ring back and staying with me. She is a trustee here at Dallas Baptist. And Allison, thank you for a wonderful daughter and bringing Jerry into our lives, and Matthew and Zachary. Our other daughter, Meredith, is stuck in Waco, as others are, but she would love to be here. My adopted brother, Mr. Vester Hughes, is over here. He did not have a brother, and I didn't, so we adopted one another, and he has made possible a lot of what has happened in my life. You mentioned Doris Tinker. She would love to be here. I mean, when I saw you, I thought, oh, my, because so many of you know her and thank the world of her. Her husband has had some pretty serious health problems, and although she had arranged transportation with Susie McLaughlin tonight, she at the last minute determined it was not wise on this kind of night to leave him alone. So she is not able to be here, but she would want me to say to everyone here, thank you and everything in her life. Yeah, I don't know what to say with this group. I look around, I mean, I'm just full of stories I'd like to tell. Some of them best left untold. But preacher's always going to have a scripture verse. But I look upon so many people here I've known and have loved through the years. And the scripture that comes to mind is out of Philippians. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you all, making requests with joy for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now. So thank you for who you are. But really, this is not about me and my memories. This is about Dr. T.B. Maston. And let me share a word about that. With the demise of our good friend James Dunn and some others, there are not many of us around who were closely related to Dr. Maston. And my first contact with him was indirect. Another Maston disciple, Dr. Foy Valentine, came to North Texas to speak to our BSU, now BSM. And I was so impressed with him as he spoke to us about race relations. Never really had heard that before in my Baptist upbringing. I was so moved by it that I got together with the Presbyterians and the Methodists and some others, and we launched a campaign to desegregate the University of North Texas. The president called me in and said, Bill, I have a mole in your organization. I know what you're trying to do, and I want to show you. We already have the plans approved by the regents to do this. And if you will demobilize your group, it will help us. I said, how am I supposed to be a counter-revolutionary? He said, I don't know, that's up to you. but it will help. And sure enough, we had graduate students at North Texas, but not undergraduate. When I got to Scotland, for Bobby and I went there for a year of study, I got a letter from Foy saying, when you get back, I have a full-time job at part-time salary. Would you come and be my associate as a student? I agreed. He said, there are two requirements. One, you must take every class that Dr. Maston teaches. Two, you must come to every Christian Life Commission meeting where Dr. Maston will be. So Gene, your dad, got me involved with Dr. Maston in that kind of personal way, and I began to know him well. When I was getting ready to do graduate work, I was sitting in the car with James Dunn, and he was saying, you've got to major in Christian ethics. I just had a visit with one of the denominational leaders, told me that if you majored in Christian ethics, you would never amount to anything in Baptist denominational life. I didn't particularly want to amount to anything, but I thought that was a rather scary idea. But James convinced me that I ought to major in Christian ethics, and I did. I'm glad. I got to know Dr. Maston better. When he retired, of all things, he asked me to take the place that he was moving from. I could never fill his shoes. No one could. But I agreed to become the professor in Christian ethics along with C.W. Scudder. Well, I was very young, and I had some pretty tough times in those days, and Dr. Maston was so encouraging. In the first class I taught, most of the students were older than I. And I was talking to one of them, let's just say his name was Robert Smith, and I said, do you like to be called Robert or Bobby or Bob or what? He said, most people younger than I am call me Mr. Smith. We finally became friends. And then I was asked by Bill Hendricks to fill in for him one Sunday night at a church, and I preached, and after the service, a group of people with puzzled looks on their faces said, could we visit with you? I said, sure. It was the pastor's search committee. They said, we heard a wonderful candidate this morning. Great sermon. But the problem was it was a sermon you preached tonight. And I said, well, tell me about it. Well, he was a seminary student. And in those days, if you preached in chapel, they would produce those sermons and students would pick them up. So he had picked up the sermon. It had a lot of personal illustrations in it, which was a bit of a problem. And we discussed it and all, and finally they became convinced. I think there was one member of the group that kept looking at me. So I said, well, can I help you? And she said, are you sure you preached it first? I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, her literal words, but he preached it so much better than you did. Well, on these occasions, I would go to Dr. Maston, and he would encourage me. And as the years rolled by, he became not only my professor and my mentor, but my wonderful friend. Shortly after I took that role, a few of us were visiting in a cafe in South Fort Worth, and we were reminiscing that with Dr. Maston's retirement, would it be possible that his emphasis and his legacy would not survive? And we determined that we would start a scholarship fund for persons to major in ethics. We wanted to call it the T.B. Maston Scholarship Fund. We approached him about it. He objected, didn't want his name highlighted. When we convinced him that we would focus on ethics and not on Maston, he agreed. Boy, would he be unhappy tonight, wouldn't he? But you couldn't separate the man from the ethic. The two have to go together. So as the years went by, that vision of some way to perpetuate the legacy began to be filled out. Bill Jones mentioned his dad, Dr. Jace Jones, and he came into the picture to help us put some structure with it, to raise some funds, And as a result, this book that he mentioned, An Approach to Christian Ethics, was written. I would like to provide everybody a copy. The only remaining copies are in the hands of Dr. Bill Tillman. Tillman will not let go of them. We are going to see about getting it reprinted. Then we began the idea, in addition to scholarships, they needed a place for people to study. So we needed a chair, a Maston chair of Christian ethics. Struggled for years to finally get enough money together, and we never did quite make it. But Dr. Lanny Hall at Hardin-Simmons stepped forward and said, "We'll take it if you'll keep on trying to help raise the funds." And the Maston chair was established in Logston at Hardin-Simmons. Dr. Bill Tillman became the first professor in that, and it thrived. We figured we needed some lectureships, and the lectureship program was started. You will receive free, when you leave, a copy of the lectureships printed in the Logston publication, The Windows, about the life and teachings of Dr. Maston. There had been a number of these lectures, but none of them had been about his life and teachings, and when they asked me to do it, I felt like maybe that was what should be done. Then we felt there needed to be some publications. And Dr. Tillman, Jimmy Allen, and others stepped forward and produced the book, The Maston Reader. And this is going to be available for you, and I hope you will pick up a copy of it. It's an excellent resource on the life and teachings of Dr. T.B. Maston. Now you might ask, who was this person who could inspire so much attention? An organization made up of some of the leadership in Baptist life, laypersons and pastors and denominational leaders. Well, Jimmy Allen, in his address about Dr. Maston, said to describe him as like putting a moonbeam in a jar. It can't be done. He's too multifaceted, too really amazing to even describe. And I don't want to even try, but let me, for those of you who did not know him, sort of excite your interest so you'll be sure and pick up these materials and read them. I'm hoping these two grandsons of mine will get them and they will devour them before the week is over. The facts are pretty clear. Dr. Maston was born in 1897 to a very poor family in East Tennessee. They were farmers. His daddy was a section hand on the railroad as addition to farming. And Dr. Maston's early memories are of his daddy taking a stick and hooking his brother and Dr. Maston to the ends of it and putting a plow behind it, and they would pull the plow to plow up the garden. Dr. Maston said later he discovered that his daddy was pushing harder than they were pulling. But he was an outstanding student, an athlete, graduated from Carson Newman, came to Southwestern, received the first doctor's degree in religious education, and then began to teach. Taught there for 41 years, retired, and after his retirement continued to teach and to work. That's the facts. He died at the age of 90 in 1988. Let me try to just quickly share a little bit about some of the aspects of that life to fill in where the statistics don't tell the whole story. Dr. Maston's life, more than anybody I have ever known, was like a symphony. Every aspect of it sort of blended with the others in a harmonious whole. And you really can't take one part of it apart from the others, but looking at his life all together, the personal, the family, the church, the professional aspect of it. Personally, in this book, many of the people who knew him best said he was the finest Christian they ever knew. To see him was to come as close as it's possible to see Christ alive. His favorite verse was what Bill Jones indicated. If we say Christ lives in us, we ought to live as he lived. And Dr. Maston embodied that. He was also a person of great faith and a person of great discipline. He puts me to shame. He was disciplined in every area of his life, in his eating, in his exercise, in his sleeping. He tried to take a nap every afternoon, but not too long. Take a spoon and hold it out by the side of the couch, and when the spoon fell and hit the floor and woke him up, he would get up. But he never seemed rigid. He never seemed harried or hurried. Always there was time for you as a person. As a person, he was a person of faith and a person of discipline. He was also a person of courage. The field of Christian ethics was a dangerous one, particularly in his day and particularly on race relations. He was threatened. He was barred from some states, not allowed admission. But he kept at it. And that courage took hold of a lot of others, and they exemplified it in their own life. He was a family man. He wrote a little testimony to his wife he called Mommy, a tribute. This is also out of print. I'm going to see if I can't get it reprinted and somehow distributed. But he describes this wonderful woman to whom he was married. They had 2 sons, one of whom was born so damaged at birth that he could never walk, never talk. He had to be bathed and fed and turned at night. And so for more than 60 years, the Mastons did that every day. He had no problem with persons who felt they should institutionalize such children, but Tom Mack was kept in the home. Dr. Maston was asked one time, who is the most influential person in your life? Some of us thought he would say Richard Niebuhr. He studied with him at Yale, or his father, because he often said he learned more theology at the end of a corn row after hoeing the corn than he did in a seminary. But he said the most influential person in my life was Tom Mack. He never really fully explained that. Tom Mack never spoke, never wrote, could not communicate, but somehow that exchange between the two of them helped Dr. Maston, he believed, form the person he was. He was a churchman. I've known some folks who were very active in school life, but they were never active in church life. Dr. Maston was a deacon. He was a tither. He was very involved in his church's committees. In interviewing some of the pastors, they said he was always cooperative, but he was sometimes questioning. And that questioning and involvement with pastors led Gamble Street to be a wonderful church. He was, perhaps for this meeting, basically thought of, however, as an ethicist, a Christian ethicist, as a person who shares Christian ethics. Now, he did that in 4 ways. He did it in his teaching, he did it in his writing, he did it in his denominational service, and he did it in his interpersonal relationships and consulting. And I could spend weeks sharing in all of these, but just briefly, in his teaching. He taught between 5,000 and 8,000 students at Southwestern Seminary in his 41 years. But the teaching went far beyond seminary. He taught in churches, he taught in schools, he taught in student assemblies. He taught everywhere he went. He was just a teacher. He said he'd rather teach than eat. He was also, in that teaching, a person who believed that his teaching ought to have the most impact possible. And that's what led him to Yale. He had a doctor's degree and 2 master's degrees, but he was afraid that in his writing that persons outside of our area would not have respect if he did not have a degree that was considered high quality, Ivy League degree. So he went to Yale in the midst of the Depression and contracted pneumonia and almost died. Finally, after several years of persistence, received the degree and became a PhD from Yale. he was never looked down on by anybody. But I don't think it was because of that degree. I think it was because of his life and the quality of his work. He was also a writer. He wrote 27 is the official list, but I think probably more than 30 books, because you have to consider translations. His work was translated into German, Arabic, French, Portuguese, Spanish, and many of his works were issued in several editions. His writing impacted the world. He was also a denominational leader. He was one of the persons who helped to found the Christian Life Commission. I wonder how many Christian Life Commission persons and staff are here tonight, would you? All right. You guys owe yourself to Dr. Maston. He was the visionary for that and stayed with it and served on the commissions. He was instrumental in A.C. Miller coming as the first. Dr. Foy Valentine, I keep pointing over here, Jean Foy's daughter is over here, was the second. Jimmy Allen then followed that. James Dunn. Who's who of Baptist life in those days. And then he was a friend and a consultant. Every Friday afternoon, that discipline showed up. He would spend the afternoon and on into Saturday writing every person who had written him. Never did a letter go unanswered. If somebody was in need, he would contact them and call them and encourage them. And he kept people who were so discouraged, sometimes they were ready to abandon the mission field or a pastorate, kept them in the places of service. The personal relationship. I wish you could have known him. Some of you knew a little bit about him. Our daughter Allison welcomed Tom Mack and the Mastons into our home from time to time and watched as Dr. Maston would feed Tom Mack, take care of him, minister to him in that sort of way. Oftentimes when called on to pray, Dr. Maston would say, "Accept the gratitude of our hearts, dear Father." I've thought about that simple prayer. Couldn't we all say tonight, accept the gratitude of our hearts, dear Father, for T.B. Maston. Amen.